Hello pilots and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in once again. Today I'm going to be redoing a very old video that I did a couple years ago now. And the reason I'm redoing it is when I first started my YouTube channel I was trying to really go all gung-ho and make it as cool as I could. And so something I was using was a voice modulation to make it sound like I was actually talking out of a radio like you would hear if you were actually sitting in the cockpit. Cool effect, really bad reviews or feedback from the channel, to the point where some people have even blatantly talked smack, which I love. Guys, if you're going to talk smack, don't do it on a YouTube channel. Like, nobody cares. Anyway, and then just touch on that one quick second. If you guys don't like my content, don't watch it. Okay? Anyways, so long story short, I had made a video on tuning Axis in DCS World and helping people to better set up their controls more comfortably for the way they use them, or this particular hardware they have. Okay, and because of that voice modulation, there were many parts of it that were very hard to hear. It's one of my actually more hit videos, even to this day, so I decided I'd go ahead and redo it in a nice clear tone where hopefully everybody can understand me and we don't have any issues. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's go ahead and jump into the seat, and first thing we're going to do is talk about what axes are what. Okay, now these aren't all of the axes that you can possibly interpret in the game, but these are the primary three that I would call. First, you have your z-axis, which is your zoom in. So, okay, leaning forward, leaning back, this is our z-axis. Okay, then we have our x-axis, which is the horizontal. And then we have our vertical, which is the y-axis. Okay, so with that being said in mind, let's go ahead and jump into the controls here. Alright, so jumping into our controls, I've already cleared all of my controls for the Hornet. The first thing I do when I start a new aircraft is I just select it and then come up here and hit clear category, select the next one, clear category, and it wipes everything in that category out. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and start with the joystick here. Okay, so we're going to start with the flight stick. So first thing we need to do is go to pitch. Now you can do this one of two ways. You can come in here, you can actually find the axis you want and select it, or what we can do is, if you're unsure about what the axis is, pitch. Obviously I'm worried about the nose going up and down, so I'm going to pull back on the stick and boom, it's assigned. Okay, and you may have to go back then forward, either way, but eventually it will register it. Okay, so we have our y-axis. Let's go to our roll. I'm going to do the same thing, go to the left. See, this is one of those examples. Now I'm going to go to the right. Joystick X. Boom, we got that. All right, so now when we start talking about axis tuning, which is this button down here, the first thing that you guys have to ask yourself is, what is the aircraft doing that you don't like? Okay, are you unable to just lightly rest your hand on the stick? Okay, if you find yourself just resting your hand on the stick and the aircraft's moving, and so you're uncomfortable because you're constantly having to hold that feather touch on the stick, you can't comfortably set your hand down. Okay, do you find that if you banking the aircraft one direction or the other, you're getting too much bank for what you think you should get? So if you're lightly pulling to the right and the aircraft's jerking to the right, okay, that's another example. Obviously you want to reduce the input to the aircraft, right? So let's talk about what we're looking at here. First, you have a couple different indicators. The first thing that we're going to look at are these two red dots. Okay, the two red dots indicate the actual movement of the physical hardware on your desk or in your sim pit, whatever it may be. Okay, so the red dots represent the actual controller you are holding in your hand, whether it be your throttle, your stick, rudder pedals, whatever. Okay, that's what the red dots represent. The black box represents the input that is being sent to the simulator. Okay, so red dots is your physical hardware, black box is the game. What does the sim think you're going to do? Alright, so let's take a look at what that looks like. The first scenario that I described was you can't comfortably rest your hand on the stick, or maybe you can't comfortably rest your feet on the rudder pedals. Okay, if you just barely touch, you just barely put your hand out and boom, the stick moves, the aircraft moves. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. This is where you're going to want a dead zone. What a dead zone is exactly what it sounds like. It is a realm of travel, a distance of travel for the physical controller where no input goes to the game. Okay, so I'm going to go really extreme here. Let's really pull the dead zone out. So watch the red dots. Okay, so if I pull the red dot to here, the black box isn't moving. If I pull the red dot to here, the black box isn't moving. And I'm moving, right now I have the Thrustmaster Warthog for those who need a reference, and I'm probably moving the stick about a ½ inch to the right. Here's a ½ inch to the left. During that motion, the stick in the aircraft is doing nothing. Okay, it thinks that there is no input going to the game. Now once I pass this threshold, now we start seeing the black box move. When the black box starts to move, that's when the aircraft itself is going to start to turn. Okay, because I'm using the x-axis here. You can see that right here. So again, as I start coming past this point, that's when the aircraft itself will start to turn. Okay, so this is what the dead zone is. So I normally recommend about depending on your hardware, obviously, 3 to 5 range on the dead zone. Okay, and that allows you to comfortably, and you can sort of see it wiggle there. Okay, I'm wiggling the stick just a little bit, and you can see that the black box isn't moving. So I can set my hand down. Okay, I just slapped my hand down onto the stick, and nothing happened. Okay, in the aircraft, I wouldn't have moved. Okay, and that's obviously really important if you're flying close formation or something. Okay, now let's talk about the saturations. All right, so here's the X saturation. What that is doing is reducing. All right, so here, the black box is all the way over to the left, okay, which means in the game, the aircraft is turning as far left as it can turn, okay, the ailerons are at full left turn, but the stick is not, okay. I can continue to pull the stick to the left. When the red dot meets the black dot, that's when the stick itself that I'm holding in my hand is at its maximum position. So again, pulling it back, and this is extreme, guys. This is probably about an inch of travel right here, easily. Okay, and that's when we start getting that. So that's what your X saturation is going to adjust. It's going to adjust how much input it's going to require for the aircraft to respond. Okay. So in this case, what it's telling me here is that at 70% input of the physical stick, so my stick is about 70% hard over to the left, okay, the aircraft in the sim is at full left. All right. So then you have the Y saturation, and that's going to do the opposite. Okay. So now the stick in my hand is as far left as it can go, but the aircraft still has room to travel. So by adjusting the Y saturation, what you're actually doing is removing play in the aircraft. Okay, you are actually limiting the aircraft's capabilities here, because obviously, you know, I'm bound by the physical hardware. I've got my stick as far left as it can go, but the aircraft is not turning as hard left as it can turn. Okay, so you typically you won't mess with saturation Y on the throttles or the rudders or the stick. Okay, where this comes in handy, I'll show you guys later, is the TDC. But very seldom will you guys, I can't think of a situation where you would want this in the aircraft, because you're actually taking away capability of the bird. Okay, so let's put that back to 100. We don't want that. Then what you have is curvature. Now this is something you adjust. Especially I recommend this to people who are brand new to a plane. You're finding yourself, it's really touchy. Okay, you just barely turn it and it's turning too fast for you. Okay, you want to be able to, let me think here. A situation where you would use curvature is where you want the aircraft to respond a little slower than what it does by default. Okay, you want to have to push the stick further before it really starts to get radical. And something where this really helps, turning this up, is like air-to-air refueling or learning to fly in formation. Okay, you want your responses to be very slow with the aircraft. You want to feel like you have more control of what it's doing. It takes a little bit, it's not quite as jerky. Okay, now the downside to adding a curvature is you have to, you know, if you're in a dogfight or something like that, as an example, you need to make a very rapid movement of the aircraft. You have to be very fast with your stick. Okay, you're gonna have to really move it quick and get it hard over before the aircraft's gonna respond the way you want it to. But in the end, you're still gonna get that maximum performance turn. And what's gonna happen is it's gonna go, I'm gonna turn slow, turning slow, turning slow, turning slow, turning slow, turning slow. And as the black box here starts to meet the downhill, that's where it's gonna start to speed up. Like right here, Okay, you can see where it really starts to make that dip off. That's where the aircraft's going to start turning really fast. Okay, so I hope this is making sense, guys. So again, if you're someone who's brand new to a plane or brand new to DCS and you're finding that the aircraft is just too responsive for you, and you want less response from the plane, you want to have to do more with your physical stick, this is where you would turn the curvature up. And then obviously vice versa, vice versa, go in the other direction. Okay, in this situation, if I go negative, okay, remember the red dots are what the actual stick that I'm holding in my hand is doing. The black box is what the aircraft is doing. So if we go into the negative, you're going to get the opposite result. It's going to become significantly more responsive for less input. Okay. All right, so I typically run, to give you guys an idea here, of about a 10 curvature, 10 to 15 these days. Just something to smooth it out. It's more of a comfort thing, and that's what this is all about, guys, is comfort. Okay, so, and the biggest thing is you want to make sure that you match these. Whatever you do to the x-axis or y-axis on the stick, make sure you do it to the other. Okay, so in this case, we're running 3, 100, 110. All right, so now we're going to come here, we're going to go to x, y, or joy y, and do the same thing with the pitch. So we got 3, 100, 100, and we're going to go to 10. Okay, perfect. And then just hit OK, and our stick is now configured. All right, now the next thing we're going to talk about is the rudder. So let's go in here to our TPR rudder pedals. And again, I'm just going to push my pedals one direction, then the other. There you can see there's a sign. Now this is one of those ones where it does drive me crazy. So first thing I'm going to do is the dead zone. These things are super sensitive. Like I've just barely rested my feet on it. And that's quite a bit of response. You know, if you're rolling down the runway and you barely tap these things, you're going to turn. So what I typically do here is I'll throw about anywhere from 3 to 5 again. And you can see just enough where, again, so I'm going to take my feet off and then plant them back down. You guys can see how it sort of jolted there. Okay. So give yourself a little wiggle room in your toes. Okay. And then we're going to hit OK. Now here's something else that tends to happen with the a lot of rudder pedals actually that I've ran into is the wheel brake. So let's assign our wheel brake. So I'm just going to push the left toe brake, boom, push the right toe brake, boom. Now if we come into the aircraft, oh, and of course they made a liar out of me. Okay, so I thought this was one of the aircraft where you had to invert it, but I'll show you guys what I'm talking about anyway. If your feet are off the rudder pedals and you find that your toe brakes are depressed, okay, something you may have to do is go in and invert the axis. Okay, so let's go back into our axis assignment. Let's go to our wheel brakes. Let's go to axis tune, and you may have to click this invert button. So I'll show you guys, in this case, the opposite. So you guys can see there, my feet are off the toe brakes and they're actually depressed. So if I push my toe brakes down, I'm going to do that right now, you can see that they just let go. Okay, so if you find yourself in that situation where you've assigned your axis to the toe brake, you push on them, you let go, and you find that the brakes are actually depressed like this, okay, so my feet are off it right now. This is where you would have to come in here, go to your axis assign, find your toe brakes, and you would actually check this. In my case, I'm going to uncheck it because I actually caused the problem. And then you'll be good. Okay? Toe brakes, again, another one. I doubt that you would have a reason to set a dead zone or curvature, but again, to your comfort, guys. If you find that your brakes are too sensitive, go in there and play with the curvature a little bit. Maybe set a dead zone, you know, depending on what the issue is. And finally, the last thing we're going to take a look at here is the, well, actually no, there's two things we got left to look at. So we're going to come over to throttle, and the next thing we're going to do is take a look at the TDC. But before I do that, I'm going to start the aircraft up and get on up in the air so we can play around with the afterburner and TDC. I'll see you guys in just a second. Alright guys, so we are back in the seat, and the first thing we're going to take a look at is getting our throttles ready to roll. And before anyone gives me any comments about not taking off from the aircraft carrier and all that, it's sort of hard to do when I haven't mapped the throttles yet. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with the left engine. If you only have one throttle, okay, one physical throttle, you're going to just use this thrust. Assign your throttle and it will control both engines. If you're like myself and you have two independent throttles, like the Thrustmaster Warthog does, We're going to do them one at a time. So we're going to do thrust left, double click it. I've got my throttles in full aft. I'm going to push the left one full forward. There's Joy RZ. Got that one set. Rinse and repeat with the right. And we're good to go. Now, we're only halfway there when it comes to the throttle. If you are like myself and you have a Thrustmaster Warthog, or you have any throttle that has a detent, okay, an afterburner detent, this is where this comes into play. And for those of you who don't know how to set it up, the Warthog does have one by default, but by default, straight out of the box, it is not enabled. Just go to YouTube and look up Thrustmaster Warthog detent, afterburner detent, and you'll find a bunch of videos that show you how to actually pull the detent into the correct position. So by default, basically it's upside down out of the box, and it's just the two screws. There's two screws in between the two throttles. There's a black plate. You just unscrew that, pull it out. There's a detent in. You take it out, you flip it over, you put the two screws back down, you have the detent. And there's also, for those of you who don't know, look up if you want to make your detent a push through. So by default it's a finger lift. You actually have to use your fingertips, lift up on the throttle to get over it. But you can actually make it into a push through. Again, go on YouTube, look up Thrustmaster Warthog afterburner detent push through, and you'll get a bunch of tutorials on how to sand it down to where you can push it through versus the finger lift. Now, for those of you who don't know the purpose of an afterburner detent real quick, the purpose of the afterburner detent is that when you, so what it essentially is I'm going to push my throttles forward. Okay, and right now there's something stopping it. I've reached the detent, and you can see here they're not at full power. Okay, and what I can do is if I continue to push a little harder, now they go forward. But if I pull them back, you can actually feel them stop. Like I'm actually pushing on the pedal, on the throttles pretty hard right now, and they're just staying put. The purpose of the detent is to give you a position where you push the throttles to the detent and the aircraft will go as fast as it can go. It's called mill power without using the afterburners. Again, that's called mill power. Okay. And then again, if you were to continue to push through, the second you start pushing past that point, the afterburners will engage. And I'm going to show you guys how to set that up, because if we go into the aircraft right now, okay, you can see our RPMs. I pulled the throttles all the way back to idle. So now I'm going to go up to the detent. Let the engine spool up. Alright, so you can see about 97% RPMs. But you can see that our afterburners are obviously not engaged. At 99, just shy of 100, 99.9, give or take, the afterburner should engage. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go back to the external view, and we're going to start with just the left throttle. I'm going to push that left throttle forward very slightly, very gently, giving the engine time to respond until I see the afterburners come on. And just take your time with it, little adjustments, because you want to be as precise as you can. Alright, so there's the afterburner. I'm going to kick it back just a hair. Okay, it's off. Now I'm going to come forward just a hair. Trying to fine tune it as well as I can. Alright. So I'm going to bring it back just before it shuts off. Again, this is just trying to fine tune as close as I can. Okay, so we know that if I go any further forward, the afterburners will turn on. So here's what we're going to do. Now we're going to go to our adjust controls. We're going to go to our axis assign. We're going to mess with just the left throttle. Go to the axis tune. First step, in order to make this work, we're going to have to turn it into a slider. The next thing is we're going to have to use a user curve. Now these are all the positions. This is going to be full aft on the throttles, and this is full forward on the throttle. Okay, now I'm going to make the slightest touch to the throttle. I mean, I don't even think that you'll be able to see it move if you were sitting here next to me. Okay, and all I'm doing, okay, and the purpose of that was just to get it to update. You saw that when we first opened up the axis assignment, it was centered. Alright, so we know that our afterburner detent, or our afterburners, turn on right about 21. Remember, the black box is the physical aircraft position. So we're going to try to keep this spot visualized in our mind. Okay, I'm going to put my throttles back into the detent. So here's the detent position. And so now what we're going to do is adjust all of these forward until the black box is just about 21. There we go. It's going to be that guy right there. Okay. So that's just about there. Now, you need to smooth this out, okay? Because remember, this curvature is all the throttle response, okay? In this range of throttle motion, the throttle will be very unpredictable, and it'll make fine-tune adjustments very difficult to do, which obviously is a problem, you know, again, if you're flying in formation, things like that. So we want to try to keep this as straight as possible. So what we're first going to do is we're going to straighten out this back end by adjusting these. There you go. Yep. Just like that. And then we're going to do the same thing back here. And you're not going to probably get it perfect, but you can get pretty close. All right, so something like that. Okay, it again doesn't have to be perfect. Oh, we don't want to mess with that one. Put that one back where it was. There we go. That's close enough. We can deal with that. Okay, and if you find any ranges where you're not happy with it, you can just come in here and sort of adjust it. Looks like this one. There we go. I mean, that's close. It's still a pretty good dip, but I mean, you're going to have some fluctuation, but it's still, this is a manageable curve, right? So then, if we come in here, we hit OK. I'm going to zero my throttle and put it back to the detent. And we should not see the afterburners come on. Let's go ahead and go back into the seat and see what our engine RPMs are reading. And we're right at 99. Let's go back outside. Now, I'm going to very slightly start pushing through my detent. And we should see the afterburners come on just about immediately. And there we go. And I pull it back out. I'm at the detent. No afterburner. Okay. So, now let's get into the final portion of the axis tuning, which is going to be our TDC, which is probably one of the most common ones that next to the detent that I hear that people struggle with. So let's go ahead and go into adjust controls. We're going to go to axis sign. We're going to find my thrust master. All right, TDC horizontal axis. And what this is the little mouse on your throttle if you have one. I know the X56 has one, the 55 has one, obviously the Warthog. Okay, it's just a little finger mouse that that you can move around. So I'm going to I moved it to the left, set my x-axis, doing the same thing with the vertical. All right, now we're just going to see what we get by default. So I'm going to come in here, and we can see that the radar sensor of interest, so by moving the TDC, this should move. All right, it's all over the place. So first thing that's off right off the bat is when I'm pushing down, so my finger's going down towards the throttle, it's going up. I don't like that. So let's change that real quick. So we're going to go into adjust controls, axis assign, and we know that we need to change the vertical axis. I'm going to go into axis tune, and I'm going to invert it. Okay. So now when I lift my finger up towards the ceiling, the TDC moves up. And same thing when I push it down towards the floor. Now, my next issue is it's moving a little too fast for me. Now, I have a modded slew, okay? So honestly, this isn't too bad because if I just put a little pressure, then it moves around to the speed that I want. If I move it all the way over, then I get behavior. So actually, it's really not bad for me, but for you guys, it may not be that way. So let's say if we wanted to slow down the motion. This is where saturation comes into play. So we're going to go into our axis tune. And what we want is the Y saturation. We want to bring this down. We want less input to the sim based on what we're doing with the stick. So I'm going to do that to both. I forgot what that was. I think that was 70. 76, okay. So we're going to do the same thing here. Bring this down to 76. Remember I said you always want them to be the same. And so now it's moving a lot slower. Okay? And so this is where the saturation would come into play. And you can set a curvature as well. Okay? If we want to slow it down even more based on the motion. So what the curvatures, remember, does, the curvature changes how much the sim will move in comparison to how much the stick is moving, or in our case the mouse. So if we throw a curvature on top of this, let's say like 30, let's go 20. 30 might be a little too much. We'll do the same thing here. And now, look how much slower it moves. But if I still move it all the way over, I still get that full rapid movement. But if I want just slight adjustments, I can just tap it over. Okay? I hope that this tutorial has helped you guys. Remember, the first thing to establish is what is bothering you about the aircraft. Okay? I'm going to touch base on the axis assignments real quick as far as what they each mean real fast. Just sort of a recap. Okay? So let's go in here. Let's find one. Okay? It doesn't matter which one. All right. Dead zone. Okay? And actually, I will apply a little bit of a dead zone here. And this one I'm going to do about a 5 because it doesn't require a whole lot of motion for it to move in the sim. So dead zone. Whatever limits the response of the sim to the movement of the aircraft. If you were, again, this is a situation where if you're just barely resting your finger on the TDC and it's moving, you want to add a dead zone. If you're resting your hand on the stick or on your rudder pedals and they're moving and you don't want them to, you add a dead zone. Okay? X saturation, okay, reduces the input of the aircraft or the control in the sim. Okay? You are taking away from the ability of the plane. Okay? Y saturation, you're taking away the control. Sorry, I had that reversed. Excuse me. X saturation is taken away from the physical control. Okay? Y saturation is taking away the ability of the sim. Okay? You don't want the sim to be able to turn as fast as it possibly can. You would take away from the Y saturation. Okay? As you can see here, I have my TDC as far over as I can. Remember, the black box is what the sim is actually going to do. Okay? And that's what we're taking away. So once again, X saturation, you're taking away from the controller. Okay? Making it more responsive with less input. Y saturation, more response from your controller, less response from the sim. Okay? Curvature, a slower response to maximum performance. Okay? By adding curvature, it is going to take you more action with your physical controller to get it to go maximum performance in the sim. Okay? I hope that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, comments, please, as always, leave them in the fields below. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Hit that bell for future notification or notification of future content. I hope you guys did find this useful. I really tried to make it as explanative as possible and detailed as possible. Hopefully I covered everything that you guys wanted covered. At this point, I'm just rambling, so I'll shut the hell up. You guys have a great weekend. We'll catch you in the next one.